No alarm clock, no boss, no calendar. For more than 95% of human existence, nobody woke up and got ready for work because work, the way we understand it today, didn't exist yet. There was no morning commute, no inbox waiting to be answered, no meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. And yet, somehow, an entire day still had to be filled. So what did that day actually look like for someone who had nowhere to be and no one telling them what time to start? For a long time, historians assumed prehistoric life was one long, exhausting fight for survival, constant hunting, constant hunger, constant danger from the moment the sun came up until it went down again. It's an easy assumption to make. No refrigerators, no stored food, no safety net if something went wrong. It sounds like a life with no room left for anything except staying alive. But when anthropologists started actually studying the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, groups who still live close to how humans lived for most of our history, they found something that didn't match that assumption at all. These communities weren't working themselves to exhaustion every single day. In many cases, they were working less than people do today, in offices, in factories, on schedules designed by someone else. Picture a group waking with the light, not with an alarm. There's no signal telling them the day has officially begun. The day starts when it starts, and it bends around whatever actually needs to happen, not around a schedule someone printed the night before. That single detail, no fixed schedule, changes how we should imagine prehistoric life. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't 24 hours of constant danger. It was something closer to a rhythm, a pattern shaped by weather, by hunger, by the needs of the group, quietly adjusted day after day for thousands of generations before anyone needed to invent a clock. We tend to fill the silence with imagined stress because that's the only version of a full day most of us have known. But a day without appointments isn't automatically a day without structure. It just means the structure lived somewhere else, not in a calendar, but in the land itself, in the sun's position, in the behavior of animals watched and understood for generations. So if there was no boss and no schedule, who decided what actually got done? The answer is almost nobody, and also everybody. Hunter-gatherer groups were small, usually somewhere between 20 and 50 people, and decisions about the day were made together, quietly, through habit more than conversation. Everyone already knew, more or less, what needed to happen because they'd been doing some version of it their entire lives, watching it done by the people who raised them. Mornings often started with a kind of quiet assessment. Was there meat left from the last hunt? Were the water sources nearby still good? Had anyone seen tracks worth following? A hunter crouches at the edge of a clearing, reading a broken branch, a print in the dirt, deciding without a word whether today is a hunting day or a resting one. Some days demanded hours of tracking, walking, waiting in silence for an animal that might never appear. Other days required almost nothing at all beyond gathering nearby plants, checking snares, or simply staying close to camp. Researchers who've timed these activities across modern hunter-gatherer societies, the closest living window we have into this way of life, found something remarkable. On average, only around 3 to 6 hours a day went into tasks that actually fed and sheltered the group. 3 to 6 hours. Compare that to an 8-hour workday, plus a commute, plus the hours spent preparing for tomorrow's version of the same thing, repeated 5 days a week for decades. It's not that prehistoric life was easy, it carried a kind of risk modern life mostly doesn't. If the hunt failed today, there was no backup plan waiting in a refrigerator. But the actual hours spent laboring on a normal day were often shorter than what most people consider a normal shift today. The scarcity was real. The busyness, strangely, wasn't. And that free time wasn't wasted either. It wasn't a void the group had to fill just to pass the hours. It was spent close to camp, close to each other, in a way that modern schedules rarely allow. Which raises an obvious question. If the hours weren't spent hunting, gathering, or building shelter, What exactly did people do with the rest of the day?
The honest answer is mostly ordinary things and a few surprising ones. A large portion of the free hours went into maintenance, the unglamorous work of keeping a small community running. Tools broke and needed repairing. Hides needed scraping and softening. Fires needed tending, not just lighting once and forgetting. None of this required all day, but it required attention, spread out in short bursts between everything else. Someone sits near the fire, turning a stone tool over in their hands, chipping small flakes off one edge, unhurried, the way a person today might absent-mindedly fix something at their kitchen table while a conversation happens around them. A significant chunk of time also went into something we rarely picture when we imagine prehistoric life: talking. Not survival planning, just talking. Stories, jokes, arguments, gossip about who did what. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups have recorded conversations lasting hours around a fire, often with no practical purpose at all, beyond passing knowledge, reinforcing relationships, and entertaining each other. In a world with no books, no recorded history, this kind of talk wasn't idle chatter. It was how the entire group's knowledge got carried forward. The stories people told at night were, in a very real sense, the only library they had, updated and reshaped every evening by whoever was speaking. Then there was rest, in a form modern life has almost entirely lost the habit of lying. Long stretches of doing nothing in particular, not scrolling, not distracted, just sitting, watching, existing near other people without needing to justify it. Some researchers studying sleep patterns in remaining hunter-gatherer societies found something unexpected too. Without electric light forcing everyone into the same rigid 8 hours, sleep was often broken into pieces, interrupted by quiet waking periods in the middle of the night, filled with low conversation or simply lying awake watching the fire, before drifting back off. A full day, it turns out, included a version of rest we've almost completely engineered out of modern life, one we now pay good money to try to recover in retreats and apps.
But perhaps the most surprising use of free time is the one that leaves physical evidence behind, tens of thousands of years later. Deep inside caves across the world, far from any obvious practical use, early humans left behind paintings, animals rendered in ochre and charcoal, handprints pressed into stone, patterns that served no function anyone has ever been able to explain in terms of survival. A hand presses pigment against cold stone in the flickering dark, the shape of a bison beginning to emerge on the wall. No one watching, no reason required beyond the act itself. This wasn't a byproduct of desperation. Making art like this takes time, planning, and travel. Some of the most striking cave paintings are found deep underground, requiring torches, ladders, and real effort just to reach. Nobody was forced to do this. There was no market for it, no audience beyond the people who already lived there. It happened anyway, which tells us something important. Even in a life defined by real scarcity and real risk, humans consistently carved out time for things that had nothing to do with staying alive and everything to do with meaning. The same pattern shows up in jewelry made from shells and bone, in deliberate burial practices involving flowers and ornaments, in musical instruments carved from animal bone found at sites tens of thousands of years old. None of it kept anyone warmer or fed. All of it says the same thing in a different way. Free time, once humans had it, was never really empty. It was where identity lived, where a group stopped being just a collection of people trying to survive and started being something closer to a culture, with its own symbols, its own sounds, its own sense of what mattered. It's worth sitting with that for a moment. Long before agriculture,
Before cities, before anything resembling a government or an economy, humans were already spending their limited free hours on things that served no survival purpose whatsoever. That instinct didn't arrive later once life got easier. It was there from close to the beginning, running alongside the hunting and the gathering the entire time.
Here's the part that tends to break most people's assumptions completely. Some researchers studying this evidence have gone as far as arguing that, on balance, many hunter-gatherer societies had more leisure time available to them than the average person working today. No 40-hour work week, no deadline stacked on deadline, no inbox that refills itself the moment you finally empty it. Just the rhythm of the season, the needs of the group, and whatever actually had to get done before the sun went down. That doesn't mean prehistoric life was better, easier, or something to romanticize from a distance. It carried real danger, real hunger, real loss that modern life mostly insulates us from. But the specific idea that early humans spent every waking hour in a desperate scramble to survive simply doesn't match what the evidence shows. The scramble was real, but it filled a smaller part of the day than most people assume. And the rest of that day was spent doing things that look, uncomfortably, a lot like what we still do for fun. Talking, resting, making things, making meaning, sitting near people we care about with nowhere else we're required to be. The fire burns lower now, the same fire from the very beginning, the same rhythm repeating itself across thousands of generations, right up until someone, eventually, invented a clock and decided the day needed a schedule after all. We didn't invent free time. We just traded the shape of it for something else, a fixed schedule instead of a flexible one, a guaranteed paycheck instead of a guaranteed meal. And whether that trade was actually worth it is a question still worth sitting with, because for more than 95% of human history, a life without a clock wasn't strange at all. It was just life. If stories like this one interest you, Kindled goes back to a different corner of human history every week, the parts nobody taught you in school.